Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 150. We're going to talk about Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit from 2005. I watched this on Netflix, and I had seen this before. As always, we start with the prominent crew and cast. You can always find links to a more complete credit list in the show notes. This film was directed by Nick Park and Steve Box. The screenplay was by Nick Park, Steve Box, Mark Burton, and Bob Baker. Nick Park is a four-time Oscar-winning animation legend whose Wallace and Gromit creations and innovative stop-motion techniques redefined the art form. He joined Aardman in 1985 after film school, animating sequences for Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer video. His 1989 student film, A Grand Day Out, introduced the beloved duo Wallace and Gromit, while his documentary-style Creature Comforts won his first Academy Award. Park's golden era produced back-to-back animated masterpieces, The Wrong Trousers in 1993 and A Close Shave in 1995, followed by Chicken Run in 2000, which remains the highest-grossing stop-motion film. Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit earned him his fourth Oscar. Recent works like Early Man in 2018 and 2024's Vengeance Most Foul prove his commitment to frame-by-frame craftsmanship. Not everyone gets permanent bronze statues of their iconic characters in their hometown. Steve Box is an Oscar-winning animator and director whose three-decade career has defined stop-motion excellence. After cutting his teeth on cult classics The Trap Door, he joined Aardman in 1990, animating iconic Wallace and Gromit shorts and voicing characters. His directorial debut, Stage Fright, in 1997, earned a BAFTA. Box has done music videos, Spice Girls' Viva Forever, and feature animation in Chicken Run, culminating in his co-direction of Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, winning an Oscar. Post-Aardman, he revitalized Moomin Valley in 2019 for TV and is currently developing an original Netflix animated feature, continuing his legacy, infusing clay with wit and warmth. Mark Burton is a screenwriter, director, and producer whose four-decade career spans radio, television, and animation. After launching his career at BBC Radio, where he created acclaimed shows like Little Blighty on the Down and the panel game We've Been Here Before, he became a writer for Spitting Image in 1988 and other comedy programs. His pivot to animation brought success, co-writing Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, Madagascar in 2005, and Romeo and Juliet in 2011, followed by directorial triumphs like the Oscar-nominated Shaun of the Sheep movie in 2015. Recent projects include writing Farmageddon and contributing to the Paddington franchise. Bob Baker found his calling through a prolific partnership with Dave Martin, the Bristol Boys, most famously shaping Doctor Who from 1971 to 1979 by creating K9 and penning classic serials like The Three Doctors. He spawned children's shows like Sky and Into the Labyrinth, crime dramas like Shoestring, and animation work, including Wallace and Gromit. Later, revisiting his most famous creation, he launched the K9 TV series in 2009 and authored two books about the robotic dog. The cast includes Peter Sallis as Wallace, Ralph Fiennes as Victor Quartermain, Helena Bonham Carter as Lady Coddington, Peter Kay as P.C. McIntosh, Nicholas Smith as Reverend Clement Hedges. Peter Sallis discovered his passion for performance in entertaining fellow troops during his World War II service in the RAF. We've seen him before in a small role in The Curse of the Werewolf in 1961. His warm Northern English accent and versatility as a character actor led to steady work in theater, radio, and television throughout the 50s and 60s. Two iconic roles cemented his place in entertainment history. For British television audiences, Sallis became a household name as the philosophical Norman Clegg in the BBC sitcom Last of the Summer Wine, appearing in all 295 episodes across the record-breaking 37-year run from 1973 to 2010, the longest-running television comedy role ever portrayed by a single actor. However, his role as the cheese-loving inventor Wallace in Nick Park's Wallace and Gromit animated films brought Sallis international fame. Beginning with 1989's A Grand Day Out, Sallis helped create one of animation's most beloved characters. Continuing through multiple Oscar-winning shorts and feature films, Sallis was awarded an OBE in 2007 for his services to drama. Ralph Fiennes came from a remarkably creative family. His siblings include actor Joseph, filmmakers Martha and Sophie, and composer Magnus, to become one of his generation's most versatile performers. After training at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, Fiennes performed with the Royal Shakespearean Company before exploding into cinema as Nazi Commandant Amon Goth in Schindler's List in 1993, earning his first Oscar nomination. His second Academy Award nomination came for his portrayal of Count Amos in The English Patient in 1996. While maintaining credentials as a serious stage actor, he won a Tony Award for Hamlet on Broadway. Fiennes has demonstrated exceptional range across genres, from the villainous Lord Voldemort in the Harry Potter series to displaying remarkable comedic timing as concierge Monsieur Gustave in the Grand Budapest Hotel in 2014. His versatility extends to the James Bond franchise, where he succeeded at Judi Dench as M, and to directing with films like Coriolanus in 2011 and The Invisible Woman in 2013. Appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire and serving as a UNICEF UK ambassador since 1999, Fiennes continues going strong. He will appear in 28 Years Later, a zombie movie, next month. Helena Bonham Carter emerged from an aristocratic British lineage. Her great-grandfather was former Prime Minister H.H. Asquith, to forge an acting career defined by extraordinary versatility and rebellion against convention. Without formal training of any sort, she burst onto the international scene at 19 in A Room with a View in 1985, and became typecast as an English Rose in period dramas before deliberately shattering this corseted image through her creative partnership with director Tim Burton, which began with Planet of the Apes in 2001 and continued through 7 films, including Big Fish, Corpse Bride, and Sweeney Todd. Her memorable portrayal of the unhinged Bellatrix Lestrange in the Harry Potter franchise cemented her reputation for bringing gothic and the macabre characters to vivid life, while her acclaimed performances in Fight Club, The King's Speech, which earned her her second Oscar nomination, following her first for The Wings of the Dove, and in Netflix's The Crown, which garnered her 2 Emmy nominations, she's demonstrated her range. Bonham Carter has combined mainstream success with fiercely independent choices, creating an unpredictable career defined by her distinctive blend of aristocratic poise, boldly unconventional personal style, and the emotional intelligence, making her one of Britain's most enduring and instantly recognizable acting talents. Peter Kay launched his comedy career by winning the Northwest Comedian of the Year award in 1997 in Channel 4's So You Think You're Funny contest, building his reputation before achieving mainstream recognition with That Peter Kay Thing in 2000 and its BAFTA-winning spin-off Phoenix Nights. His observational comedy, centered on affectionate portrayals of working-class northern life and family dynamics, resonated powerfully with British audiences, leading to record-breaking stand-up tours, including his 2010-2011 tour that sold over 1.2 million tickets. Beyond stand-up, Kay demonstrated remarkable versatility as an actor, writer, and director across television and film. His accolades include multiple British Comedy Awards, Royal Television Society Awards, BAFTA Awards, the Rose d'Or, and an honorable doctorate from the University of Salford. Nicholas Smith built a foundation in theater before beginning his television career as a non-speaking extra in various ITV programs, securing his first speaking role in the BBC's Doctor Who serial The Dalek Invasion of Earth in 1964, where he persuaded the director to expand his character's role. This was followed by appearances in classic British television series, including The Saint, The Avengers, and The Champions. However, his career-defining role as Mr. Cuthbert Jug-Ears Rumbold, the endearingly incompetent bald department store manager with prominent years in the BBC sitcom Are You Being Served, made him a household name. Smith portrayed the perpetually bewildered manager across all 69 episodes until 1985, making him the only actor to appear in every episode of their beloved series, as well as the 1977 film adaptation and the sequel series Grace and Favor in 1992 and 93. I highly recommend this film for werewolf enthusiasts looking for something slightly different. While it trades traditional horror for family-friendly comedy, it cleverly incorporates classic werewolf tropes into a uniquely British stop-motion experience. Whether you're a fan of animation, British humor, or just looking for a lycanthropic film to watch with younger viewers, this is a delightful addition to the werewolf canon. Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit is a landmark in stop-motion animation, with its production spanning 5 grueling years and involving over 2,800 meticulously crafted shots, each painstakingly animated frame by frame. Given the immense detail required, animators could only produce an average of 3 seconds of footage per day, making the film an extraordinary labor of love and patience. Its dedication paid off when, in 2006, it became the first stop-motion film to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, triumphing over formidable competition like Howl's Moving Castle and Corpse Bride, a victory that cemented its legacy in animation history. So let's cover the synopsis. It's a foggy English night in the hamlet of Tottingham. A gnome security sensor activates a Goldberg machine, awakening our heroes, Wallace and his faithful canine companion, Gromit. The pair catch a rabbit attempting to steal a giant pumpkin. Rather than kill the rabbit, Wallace and Gromit humanely keep nearly 100 rabbits in pens. Outside in a greenhouse, Gromit is raising a huge watermelon. Wallace attempts to cheat on his vegetarian diet by snacking on a bit of cheese. He's spared a bit of self-inflicted mental brainwashing when Lady Toddington calls for his help with a rabbit infestation. Her suitor Victor intends to solve the problem with his trusty shotgun. Instead, he and his toupee end up in a rabbit containment tank. Lady Toddington inadvertently gives Wallace the idea to reform the rabbits so that they won't prey on the community's vegetable gardens. Back at his lab, Wallace harnesses the power of the full moon to mentally condition the rabbits so that they won't like vegetables. After some hijinks, it seems to work. That night, a large, mysterious beast attacks the vicar's produce. What appears to be a giant rabbit goes on a rampage of vegetable carnage. At a town meeting, the vicar announces that they have incurred God's wrath by forcing vegetables to swell beyond God's intended size. He describes the vicious were-rabbit. Victor scoffs at the idea, assuring everyone that it is just a big rabbit and that he can kill it. Lady Toddington won't consider violence against fluffy creatures and begs the town to give Wallace another chance to capture the beast. Wallace comes up with a giant female rabbit robot on top of his van as a lure. When it breaks down, the were-rabbit appears, leading Gromit on a reckless chase through the village. The monster drags Gromit and the van through its underground tunnels as it eats through almost every town garden. Wallace and Gromit reunite at their home in the morning. Wallace is fielding upset calls from dozens of irate customers. Wallace believes one of the rabbits, Hutch, is the monster. Wallace goes to tell Lady Toddington that they've caught the culprit. Gromit learns the were-rabbit is actually Wallace, thanks to feedback from his brainwashing machine. The sun goes down while the pair drives home through the dark forest. Victor shows up thinking that he's going to teach Wallace a lesson, only to witness him transform into the hulking were-rabbit and run off into the stormy night. Wallace sets off in pursuit, while Victor visits the vicar for intelligence on killing the beast. The vicar informs him that the were-rabbit can only be killed by 24-karat gold bullets. Get it? Carrots? Carrots? Luckily, the vicar has 3 golden bullets on hand. That was weird. Back home the next morning, Gromit has no idea how to help his friend and master. The first step has got to be convincing Wallace that he is the problem. He does this by demonstrating Hutch's newfound love of cheese. Turns out Hutch is a were-Wallace. Lady Toddington is coerced into considering canceling the carrot, cabbage, and cauliflower competition. She tries to tell Wallace the bad news and confess her newfound feelings for him, but he's beginning his nightly transformation. Victor shows up to kill Wallace, but Gromit uses the giant rabbit woman robot to lead Wallace to safety as Victor takes a shot with the first gold bullet. Victor catches Gromit and cages him to prevent him from interfering further. However, Gromit is far too smart for that. He teams up with the were-Wallace to escape and sets off to save the real Wallace, with his competition melon as bait. At the vegetable fair, panic sets in when the gardeners learn that the were-rabbit is on the loose again. Victor wastes his second bullet, getting everyone's attention. When a villager wastes the last golden bullet, Victor turns to the golden carrot trophy in an elephant gun as a suitable replacement. Wallace absconds with Lady Toddington and climbs to her secret greenhouse atop her mansion. Gromit has a dogfight with Victor's bulldog in toy planes. Get it? Dog fight. Lady Toddington deduces the were-rabbit is Wallace and begs Victor to stop his hunt. Victor accidentally reveals that he knows it's Wallace and doesn't really care, exposing him as the villain. Gromit saves Wallace from the golden carrot. Wallace returns the favor as the toy plane falls from the sky. The pair crash into the cheese tent. Lady Toddington dumps a disarmed Victor. Wallace returns to human form, and Gromit uses the power of cheese to permanently de-rabbit Wallace. Lady Toddington decides to turn her estate into a bunny sanctuary. The end. Obviously, the Curse of the Were-Rabbit employs stop-motion animation to create its unique were creatures. The transformation sequences very cleverly show Wallace's teeth growing, his hands becoming paw-like, and his body expanding to monstrous proportions, all while maintaining that plasticine charm of the Aardman style. The animators paid homage to classic werewolf transformations while adding their comedic touch. Wallace's shadow sometimes reveals his were-rabbit form before he fully transforms, a technique reminiscent of classic monster movies. It's unclear if the transformations are triggered by the sight or smell of vegetables or the traditional full moon, adding to the film's playful subversion of werewolf tropes. I really enjoyed the final transformation where Wallace becomes a human, which uses the old school series of fades as an homage to the original werewolf movies, even though they didn't have to do it that way. It was a clear sign of love and respect for the black and white movies of the past. The film playfully adapts werewolf mythology to suit its quirky universe. The transformation is caused by a self-inflicted mind meld with a rabbit rather than a bite or curse. The were-rabbit is perhaps triggered by vegetables instead of the full moon, though the moon still plays a strong symbolic role. Golden bullets replace silver as the monster's weakness, a pun playing on the homophonic nature of the word carrot. The film maintains the dual nature concept central to werewolf lore, and Wallace has no memory of his were-rabbit activities, even though in the climax it's clearly established that were-rabbit is willing to sacrifice himself for Gromit. Now, this film is a light-hearted claymation adventure about a lovable inventor and his faithful canine companion. However, beneath that charming exterior lies an exploration of humanity's relationship with the natural world. While traditional werewolf narratives examine humanity's internal bestial natures, directors Nick Park and Steve Box instead comment on our external relationship with animals and the environment. The central plot device of the annual giant vegetable competition represents humanity's fundamental desire to control, manipulate, and showcase nature. In the quaint English village of Tottingham, residents cultivate unnaturally large vegetables. Specimens exist not for sustenance, but for display and competition. Their obsession with growing these perfect vegetables exemplifies humanity's tendency to reshape nature according to our aesthetics and our competitive ideals. These prized vegetables are status symbols. The villagers' extreme protective measures highlight this relationship's absurdity. This competition is a microcosm of broader agricultural practices. Humans select, breed, and manipulate plants for characteristics that serve human desires. The film gently satirizes our tendency to value the unnatural products of our interference more highly than nature's unaltered offerings, like the rabbits. Contrasting with the villagers are the rabbits, representing untamed nature refusing to comply with human wishes. The rabbits' persistent raids on vegetable gardens demonstrate nature pushing back against human control. The rabbits are not malevolent destroyers, but creatures just following their natural drives. They're antagonists without evil intent, but with a nature that happens to conflict with human interests. This portrayal avoids demonizing wildlife while still acknowledging that there is genuine conflict between human agricultural and wildlife behavior. The film presents two contrasting approaches to managing the human-nature relationship, embodied by different characters. Victor represents the traditional dominance-based approach to nature management. His preferred solution to the rabbit problem is violent eradication. Shoot them with his rifle. For Victor, nature exists to be conquered, and animals that interfere with human desires deserve elimination. His hunting trophies signify his identity as a master of nature, and his use of a toupee symbolizes his rejection of natural processes like aging and hair loss. Victor's approach is characterized by violence as a first resort rather than a last, viewing animals as objects rather than sentient beings, and a desire for control through elimination, pride in displaying conquered nature through trophies, and contempt for those who show compassion towards animals. His attitude toward wildlife management is, when animal and human interests conflict, the animals must yield permanently. In contrast to this, Lady Toddington and Wallace embody a more compassionate, stewardship-based approach to nature. Lady Toddington's preference for a humane solution reflects an environmental ethic that considers animal welfare alongside human interests. Her proposed sanctuary represents an attempt at coexistence rather than elimination. Wallace's inventions similarly seek to solve the rabbit problem without harming the creatures. His Bunvac 6000 captures rather than kills, and his misguided attempt at brainwashing the rabbits aimed to modify their behavior without physically harming them. Now, while these solutions prove imperfect or even create bigger new problems, they stem from a desire to resolve human nature conflicts without unnecessary suffering. Their approach is characterized by nonviolent solutions, acknowledging that animals have welfare, attempting to accommodate rather than eliminate, and accepting responsibilities for management failures, and showing willingness to compromise human convenience for animal welfare. This compassionate approach ultimately proves superior within the film's moral framework. The film's central transformation, Wallace becoming the were-rabbit, provides the best commentary on the man versus nature relationship. Unlike traditional werewolf narratives, where transformation represents the emergence of humanity's suppressed bestial nature, Wallace's transformation literalizes the merger of human and animal identities. This transformation becomes not a descent into brutality, but a crossing of species boundaries. The film complicates traditional werewolf tropes by making Wallace's transformation state neither wholly monstrous nor wholly bestial. The were-rabbit remains capable of compassion, recognition, and moral choice, suggesting that embracing our connection to animal nature need not diminish our humanity. Wallace's transformation literally places him in the position of the rabbits he has been capturing. This perspective shift enables him to experience the creature's drives and desires. The film's resolution rejects both extreme positions in the man versus nature conflict. Neither Victor's violent domination nor a complete surrender to unchecked natural processes prevails. Instead, the solution involves meeting nature halfway. Gromit saves Wallace. Wallace, as the were-rabbit, sacrifices himself to save Gromit. Lady Toddington converts her estate into a rabbit reserve, providing them with what they need, keeping the villagers' gardens safe. This conclusion suggests that the man versus nature conflict is best resolved through mutual accommodation. The rabbits gain protected habitat, the humans maintain their vegetable gardens, and each makes allowances for the other's needs. A final theme that's worth exploring in relation to this is the film's portrayal of domestication as a potential partnership rather than domination. Gromit, who is a domesticated dog, operates with agency, intelligence, and moral clarity throughout the film. His relationship with Wallace represents not a mastery. Wallace is not the master, really, of Gromit, but mutual dependence and cooperation across species lines. This vision of partnership offers a model for human-nature relationships that acknowledge our differences while finding common ground for mutual benefit. Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, transcends its family-friendly packaging to offer a sophisticated commentary on humanity's relationship with the natural world. By reimagining the werewolf trope as a literal merger of human and animal rather than a metaphor of humanity's inner beast, the film redirects our attention to our external relationship with actual animals and environments. The film ultimately rejects both uncritical anthropocentrism, represented by Victor, and naive nature worship in favor of a middle path, respectful stewardship that acknowledges both human needs and the inherent value of nature. In an era of increasing environmental challenges, the film's gentle insistence that compassion, creativity, and compromise offer better solutions than domination and violence provides a valuable lesson wrapped in claymation charm. Moving on, let's talk about classic horror homages. We've seen werewolf comedies before. I'm thinking of Full Moon High and Teen Wolf. In my honest opinion, Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit is the best example of this genre hybrid filmmaking we've seen so far, blending family-friendly clay animation with reverent homages to classic horror cinema. Directors Nick Park and Steve Box crafted a film operating on multiple levels, delighting children with silly slapstick comedy while offering adult audiences a treasure trove of cinematic references to horror films of bygone eras, paying tribute to classic horror traditions, particularly Universal and Hammer horror films, while maintaining its distinctly British charm and accessibility for viewers of all ages. The visual language of The Curse of the Were-Rabbit deliberately evokes the atmospheric stylistic choices that defined Universal monster movies of the 30s and 40s, as well as Hammer Film Productions' gothic horror output from the 50s through the 70s. Despite being crafted in bright, tactile claymation, the film incorporates visual elements characteristic of classic horror cinema. The transformation sequences, particularly in the forest, feature dramatic lightning strikes that illuminate the scene in stark chiaroscuro, a direct reference to similar moments in films like Frankenstein from 1931 and The Wolfman from 1941. These dramatic lighting effects were a hallmark of Universal's approach to monster reveals, creating moments of terror and visual spectacle. The film's nighttime sequences employ exaggerated shadows and moonlit landscapes, recalling the expressionistic cinematography of early horror cinema. When Gromit investigates suspicious happenings near a tunnel, the visual composition mirrors the gothic sensibilities of films like Dracula in 1931 and Hammer's The Curse of the Werewolf in 1961. Even architectural elements within the film, from the imposing Toddington Hall with its rooftop greenhouse to the basement laboratory where Wallace conducts his experiments, echo the Gothic sensibilities that provided the backdrop for countless monster movies. Wallace's laboratory sequences pay homage to the mad scientist tradition established in films like Frankenstein. The elaborate contraptions, bubbling liquids, and eventually disastrous experiments directly reference the laboratory scenes that were a staple of Universal's science gone wrong horror narratives. The mind manipulation omatic device particularly evokes the kind of pseudoscientific machinery featured prominently in films like The Bride of Frankenstein in 1935. Beyond its visual aesthetics, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit embraces and lovingly parodies numerous narrative conventions and character archetypes established by classic horror cinema. Wallace's transformation into the were-rabbit positions him within the tradition of sympathetic monsters who cannot control their transformations, a trope exemplified by Lon Chaney Jr.'s portrayal of Lawrence Talbot in The Wolfman. Like many classic werewolf narratives, Wallace is a good-natured individual cursed to become something unrecognizable when the moon rises. The film cleverly substitutes the traditional bloodlust with an insatiable craving for vegetables, maintaining the transformation angst while keeping the content appropriate for younger viewers. Victor Quartermain, armed with his golden bullets and determined to eliminate the were-rabbit, represents the classic monster hunter archetype seen in characters like Van Helsing from Dracula and numerous Hammer films. His melodramatic pronouncements and excessive weaponry satirize the often overzealous monster hunters of classic horror, who frequently pose a greater threat than the monsters themselves due to their single-minded pursuit. Perhaps the single most iconic visual reference comes from the townspeople who form an angry mob, complete with torches and garden implements, standing in for pitchforks, to hunt down the were-rabbit. This scene directly evokes similar moments from Frankenstein and countless other monster films where villagers unite against a real or perceived supernatural threat. The film humorously updates this trope by having the mob arrive in an orderly queue of cars and trucks, maintaining distinctly British civility even in the monster hunting fervor. The Curse of the Were-Rabbit doesn't merely adopt general horror aesthetics, but includes numerous specific scenes that directly reference iconic moments from horror cinema. When Gromit discovers evidence of Wallace's transformation by finding tufts of rabbit fur and giant rabbit footprints, the scene mirrors the investigative sequences in Scream of the Wolf from 1974. Complete with mounting suspense and dawning realization, Gromit's piecing together of clues follows the classic horror convention of the protagonist gradually discovering the monster's true identity. Perhaps the most brilliantly executed homage is the film's parody of Jaws during the vegetable competition attack sequence. Substituting prized vegetables for swimmers, the scene recreates the tension and perspective shots famously used by Spielberg, even including a direct visual reference to the iconic poster image when the were-rabbit rises up behind an unsuspecting victim. The scene is accompanied by music that evokes John Williams' famous two-note shark theme, cleverly transposed to suggest a hopping rabbit rather than a lurking shark. While predominantly drawing from Golden Age horror cinema, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit also incorporates references to more contemporary horror. Lady Toddington's discovery of Wallace's dual identity echoes similar revelation scenes from films like The Howling, 1981, playing with the romantic implications of loving someone with a monstrous alter ego, a theme explored frequently in later werewolf films that emphasize the romantic and sexual undertones of the werewolf myth. What makes The Curse of the Were-Rabbit particularly clever is not just its incorporation of horror references, but how it subverts expectations. The monster is ultimately harmless, concerned with vegetables rather than human prey, inverting the traditional threat level while maintaining the visual language of danger. This clever substitution allows the film to utilize horror imagery without actually frightening its younger audience. The curse is created not through supernatural means, but through science gone awry, specifically Wallace's mind-altering device. This places the film more in line with science fiction horror like The Fly rather than supernatural horror, while still drawing from both traditions visually. The film's resolution comes not through destroying the monster, but ultimately through accepting and curing it, offering a more compassionate conclusion than traditional horror films typically provide. Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, demonstrates how deeply embedded horror conventions are in our cultural consciousness, and how effectively they can be repurposed for entirely different audiences. By drawing upon the rich visual language and narrative traditions of classic horror, the filmmakers created a work that functions as a loving homage and gentle parody. The film recognizes what makes horror iconography so enduring and then transforms those elements into something accessible for all audiences. Through this careful balancing act, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit achieves something remarkable. It introduces younger viewers to the visual vocabulary of classic horror while providing knowledgeable fans with the pleasure of recognition, all within the context of a charming story about a man, his dog, and their vegetable-obsessed community. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing a werewolf in the Amazon from 2005. Keep your eye on the moon, the silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.